Man, did 4Kids miss out on a gold mine by not adapting beyond the first season. The cold openers return for the second season, and if I'm gonna be honest, while I like the blue rose thorn borders, especially considering the events of this first episode, I kind of miss the old BGM. The one they play here is just kind of generic and nowhere near as whimsical in my opinion, especially without the cute little whistle they played. And unfortunately, the same can kind of apply to the second opening. I don't know, maybe I'm just not a huge fan of the more pop tunes, versus the more exciting rock-like tunes, especially that awesome opening chord. Now, I just want to emphasize, these are just some very personal nitpicks, as while I don't like these tunes, at least compared to the first season, I also don't think they're bad in any way. Hell, I'll say right here, the opening animation is leagues better than the first, actually showing some key elements of the season, like the Ojamajo's new transformations, their new toys of course, and a lot more focus on their personalities. I also love all the little details, like the disemboweled chibi heads flying by here, that's just so morbidly adorable. Anyway, the show proper opened with the Ojamajo receiving back their report cards, and Doremi, all things considered, got some surprisingly solid grades, with most of it all just being in the middle. I mean, she was certainly able to accept it better than Hazuki and her report.
All I said was a little too much sauce. It's no big deal, really.
But yeah, things were kind of playing out like any other episode in this series, with no big reintroductions to these characters like any other sequel season would. I just wanted to point it out and how it adds to my thesis from the last review, where I said they purposely left things very much unfinalized, as they were always likely just going to pick things up the following week. Then hey, at least they didn't repeat things over and over again. Anyway, the Ojamajo went back to their old shop to see it off one last time before the final move. However, like most stores in this current economy, they decided to do their move a little ahead of schedule. Though in this case, it was more because Majrika didn't want to have to say goodbye to the girls, and pretty much admitted in a letter that the little toad had gotten attached to these kids in a really touching moment. However, their tears wouldn't have to last too long.
Did you ever have the feeling you was being watched?
Discovering Majrika's hairdryer that just so happened to be lying around, the Ojamajo decided to use it as a convenient excuse to visit the witch's world one last time to return it to its owner. And also, as it just so happened, the key to the other world was still in the door. Meanwhile, the Witch Queen and her giant hair, god, how many shampoo bottles does she go through in one day, was being informed that a magical baby was going to be born soon and needed guardians. And fortunately, she had some candidates in mind, as well as some obviously reused animation. Back with the Ojamajo, they tried to get to the village of the magical frogs. Doremi suggested that they take a shortcut through the Queen's garden, but of course they had security on watch. Still, when all else fails, you can always count on your politicians to provide little holes to slip through. They ended up coming through a rose garden, with the queen clearly favoring a certain color. You're only saying that because you don't want to recall how one almost ate y'all. However, this particular rose didn't have teeth, but rather... Hey, Mirai, Liko, you forgot one! Anyway, after an eye catch that provides some obvious product placement, we cut back to the Ojamajo discovering the flower baby, with Doremi being the first one to make direct eye contact with her. This is what happens when y'all overwater your MacGuffin flower babies. The guards did eventually arrive. Geez, you'd think they'd station at least a few closer to the thing they're trying to guard. However, rather than arresting them, they just took the interlopers to the queen. Not too surprisingly, she assigned Doremi to be the baby's mother because witch babies, on top of being born from flowers rather than cabbage patches, were also like ducks and had instantly branded herself to Doremi. To at least give them a little support, she recommissioned them as witch apprentices while still still having their rank 1 benefits, including some upgraded taps. Well, okay, that's a bit of a confusing little loophole. So basically, they're going to be perpetual apprentices while also still kind of being ranked like proper witches. I mean, at this point, you could say that they're ranked 2 witches and that this is part of their punishment, or do you just want to focus more on selling some new toys? Well, anyway, we got transformation sequences for all 4 girls, which I'm sorry to say, I can't say who animated what sequences. Sakugaboru has no answers, and I can't find any listings like I did for Symphogear or Precure. I will say they're at least cute, and I wouldn't be surprised if Sawako Yamamoto took a little influence from them when animating Cure Piece's transformation, as even Queenie outright told them to play them like castanets. Sometimes the most obvious references are the best references. I also kind of like how the transformations of the original trio actually share a similar basis to the season 1 versions, but the castanet element makes them feel new enough, like a fresh coat of paint. The only entirely new one was of course Ompu's, as she didn't get a season 1 transformation, and of course she posed like an idol for this one. However, speaking of things being like the good old days, Majorika and the fairies returned in somewhat of a touching scene. Well, at least she didn't go full Will Smith on her. Oh, and also, Ompu has a fairy named Roro now. Oh yeah, did you know? She was in the show the whole time, just like Mr. Poopy Butthole. Okay, but seriously, this was likely one of those plot threads that was purposely left hanging so that it could be addressed later. I don't think her being mentioned in the last episode was meant to be a full-on sequel hook, but more so included so that they could avoid plot holes later. But anyway, with the band back together, they were ready to take care of the infant, with the award that they'd get back their full witch titles and crystals if they did for a whole year. With that, they made their way back to the Beholdo for a blatant toy demo. This included introducing their new wands and spheres in the form of seeds that do look a lot better, as they look far more thematically appropriate as little music notes. Moreover, the way the now foursome summoned the magical stage was far more cinematic, with them dancing around like little ballerinas. And thus, appropriately, their first new spell was very impressive as they completely reformed the Beholdo into a flower shop. This included a greenhouse with a similar environment as the one the infant was born in. With that, the queen left the Ojamajo with a few more baby essentials, as well as Pop's tap after Doremi successfully negotiated to let her in on this too. Then the episode ended with the Ojamajo's new status quo and challenges established, which included some potty training. Believe me, Doremi, as an uncle, I can tell you things can get a lot worse. But thankfully, that was not the case at all for this first episode that has acted as a very strong continuation for the franchise. This first episode did a good job not wasting too much time and introduced a ton of new concepts and strong world building. Granted, some of it could have been explained better, and yeah, some of it was blatant toy adverts, but I don't mind it too much as long as they can properly work it into the show. I wouldn't say it's a total new start, as they are basically starting right off where they left off from, but still, this cast remains just as strong and as fun as ever. When you consider the fact this series was originally meant to just be one season, it's kind of impressive that they managed to do a ton of world building within just this first episode of the second. Sure, a baby coming out of a flower is a little out of nowhere, even for this series, and especially with no build-up, but again, somewhat unexpected sequel, and as a means of shaking up the status quo and giving them more new toys, it works. More importantly, it is nice to see the Ojamajo recognizing the consequences of their actions in the last arc, and then being given a second chance in some very touching moments. Thus, I don't mind all of the loopholes the Queen let them slip through to essentially start up their New Game Plus. It certainly makes the big lady a much more intriguing character, with her clearly acting as a distant mentor to the Ojamajo. And while certain things like Roro could have used a little more explanation, and literal potty humor isn't going to be for everyone, this was a great way of re-establishing the Ojamajo and their new goals and even power sets. I'm certainly looking forward to covering this series, even if it does remind me a tad bit too much of dealing with a kid who will probably remain in her terrible twos for the foreseeable future. And with that, I'm not totally sure what I'm gonna do for the rest of this week. Maybe I'll do another manga review, or maybe I'll get around to finishing up that first video for the secondary channel. We'll see how much time I have this week, but you'll probably see at least something this weekend, if at all possible. So hopefully look forward to that. Until then though, farewell for now my friends, and uh-oh, the dandelions are starting to bloom. Quick, somebody call the adoption agency!